Alex Carter pushed through the thick alien plants that covered the forest floor. His boots made soft sounds on the strange purple leaves as he moved forward with his team. The air smelled different here on this moon called Valdris. It was sweet, but also had a metallic taste that made his nose itch. 3 days had passed since the big battle at Crimson Ridge. Alex and his small group of Marines were looking for any signs of enemy movement in this area. The trees here were tall and blue, with silver bark that seemed to glow softly in the dim light. Everything felt wrong and alien to Alex, but he had learned to trust his training over his feelings. Dr. Maya Rodriguez walked behind him, her medical bag bouncing against her hip. She was the team medic and one of the smartest people Alex had ever worked with. Behind her came the other 3 Marines in their unit. They all moved quietly through the forest, watching for any sign of danger. Alex stopped when he saw something strange ahead. Through the trees, he could see what looked like a clearing. But as they got closer, he realized it was not a natural clearing at all. The ground was torn up and burned. Broken weapons lay scattered everywhere. Bodies of different alien species were spread across the area. Maya came up beside Alex and looked at the battlefield. Her face went pale when she saw how many dead aliens were lying there. Some had blue skin and looked almost human except for their pointed ears and the strange patterns that glowed on their skin. Others were bigger and had gray skin with sharp claws and teeth. Alex had seen battles before, but this one looked especially brutal. The 2 alien species had clearly fought each other with everything they had. Burn marks on the trees showed where energy weapons had been fired. Deep cuts in the ground showed where close combat had happened. Maya was already moving between the bodies, checking to see if anyone was still alive. Alex followed her, keeping his weapon ready in case any enemies were still hiding in the area. Most of the aliens had been dead for hours, but then Maya called out to him. She was kneeling beside one of the blue-skinned aliens near the center of the battlefield. This one was different from the others. Her clothes were made of fine materials, and she wore jewelry that sparkled even in the dim forest light. The glowing patterns on her skin were more complex than the others Alex had seen. The alien was a female, and she was still breathing, but just barely. Her blue skin had turned very pale, almost white. The glowing patterns that covered her arms and face were flickering like dying lights. Blood was flowing from several wounds on her body. Maya quickly opened her medical bag and started working on the alien. She used her scanner to check the alien's condition, and Alex could see from her face that the news was bad. The alien's eyes opened for a moment, and Alex was surprised to see that they were a deep purple color, almost human-like in their expression of pain and fear. Just then, Alex heard a sound behind him. He spun around with his weapon ready, but instead of an enemy, he saw another figure emerging from the trees. This one looked different from both alien species they had seen. She was tall and thin, with long silver hair and pointed ears. Her skin was pale but had a healthy glow to it. She moved with a grace that seemed almost magical. The newcomer raised her hands to show she was not armed. She spoke in perfect English, which surprised Alex completely. Her voice was soft and musical, not like any human voice he had heard before. She said her name was Luna Brightleaf, and she was what humans called an elf. Alex had heard stories about elves in old books, but he never thought they were real. Luna explained that she had been following this battle for days, trying to prevent something terrible from happening. Luna looked down at the dying alien and told them this was Princess Lyra of the Zephyrian Empire. She said that Lyra had been working secretly to stop a war that would destroy billions of lives across many star systems. If Lyra died now, all her work would be lost, and the war would begin. Maya continued working on Lyra, but her medical supplies were not helping. She told Alex that the alien's blood chemistry was too different from humans. Nothing she had could stop the bleeding or fix the damage from the alien weapons. Luna knelt beside Lyra and touched her forehead gently. She said that her elvish knowledge told her something that might help. Human blood, she said, might be compatible with Zephyrian blood in ways that their medical science did not understand. But she warned that no one knew what might happen if they tried such a thing. Alex looked at his dying alien princess and made a decision that would change everything. Without asking permission from his commanders or thinking about the rules, he rolled up his sleeve and told Maya to take his blood and give it to Lyra. Maya protested, saying it was too dangerous and against all medical protocols. But Alex could see that Lyra was dying, and Luna's words about preventing a galactic war echoed in his mind. He ordered Maya to do the transfusion. With shaking hands, Maya set up the equipment to transfer blood directly from Alex to Lyra. As his red human blood began to flow into the alien princess's veins, something amazing happened. The dying glow, patterns on Lyra's skin began to brighten. Her pale blue color started to return to normal. Alex felt strange as his blood left his body. He felt dizzy but also somehow connected to something he could not understand. Luna watched with wide eyes as Lyra's breathing became stronger and her wounds began to heal faster than should have been possible. The transfusion continued until Maya said it was enough. Alex felt weak, but alive. Lyra's eyes opened again, and this time they were bright and alert. When she looked at Alex, he felt something pass between them, like an invisible thread connecting their minds. Luna whispered that something unprecedented had just happened, something that would change the fate of the entire galaxy. 1 week had passed since Alex gave his blood to save Princess Lyra. They were now hiding in a secret base that Luna had brought them to, deep inside a mountain on the moon Valdris. The base belonged to rebels who fought against both the Zephyrian Empire and their enemies, the Krex Dominion. Alex sat in a chair next to Lyra's bed, watching her sleep. Something strange had happened to both of them after the blood transfusion. He could feel her presence in his mind, like a warm light that never went away. Sometimes he could sense her emotions, and he was sure she could feel his, too. Dr. Maya Rodriguez had been running tests on both of them for days. Her equipment showed readings that made no sense according to human medical science. Lyra's body had not only healed completely, but she seemed stronger than before. The glowing patterns on her skin were brighter and more complex than any Zephyrian Maya had ever seen. Alex was different, too. His reflexes had become much faster, and he could sense danger before it happened. During training exercises with the rebel soldiers, he moved like he could predict what his opponents would do before they did it. His strength had increased, and he needed less sleep than before. Lyra opened her purple eyes and looked at Alex. Without speaking, he knew she was feeling better. She sat up in bed, and the glow from her skin patterns filled the room with soft, blue light. When she spoke, her voice was like music, but Alex could understand every word even though she was speaking in her own alien language. Maya came into the room carrying her medical scanner and a tablet full of test results. She looked tired but excited as she explained what she had discovered. The human blood had done more than just save Lyra's life. It had somehow enhanced her natural Zephyrian abilities in ways that should have been impossible. Lyra stood up and walked to the center of the room. She raised her hands, and energy began to flow around her fingers like visible lightning. She moved her hands in patterns, and the energy responded, forming shapes in the air. Maya watched in amazement as Lyra created complex energy fields that would have taken the most skilled Zephyrian warriors years to master. Luna entered the room and saw what Lyra was doing. The elf's face went pale with shock. She said that in all her long life, she had never seen a Zephyrian with such power. The energy patterns Lyra was creating matched descriptions from ancient elvish texts that were thousands of years old. Alex felt something stirring in his own body as he watched Lyra work with the energy. Without thinking about it, he reached out his hand toward her energy field. When his fingers touched the glowing patterns, the energy became even brighter and more stable. Lyra gasped as she felt Alex's mind connecting with hers more deeply than before. Luna sat down heavily in a chair and began to speak about things she had never told anyone before. She said she was much older than she looked, and she had been alive when terrible things happened to the galaxy long ago. She called herself a guardian, someone whose job was to watch for signs of an ancient evil called the Void Plague. The Void Plague, Luna explained, was something that came from the empty spaces between stars. It fed on fear and hatred between different species. Wherever beings fought each other instead of working together, the Void Plague grew stronger. It had destroyed entire civilizations before, leaving only scattered survivors like the elves. Luna pulled out an old book made of strange metal pages covered in elvish writing. She showed them pictures and symbols that seemed to move on their own. According to the ancient prophecies in this book, there would come a time when two different species would join their life forces together. This joining would create something new and powerful that could fight against the Void Plague. Alex looked at Lyra, and both of them understood what Luna was saying. The blood transfusion had not just saved Lyra's life. It had created the bond that the ancient prophecies described. They were connected now in a way that had never happened between humans and Zephyrians before. Maya continued studying her test results and made another shocking discovery. Alex's blood had changed after the transfusion. It now carried some of Lyra's alien genetic material. Anyone who came into contact with this changed blood would begin to develop similar connections to nearby aliens. The bonding process could spread to others. As Maya explained her findings, alarms began to sound throughout the rebel base. Commander Kate Sullivan, the human officer in charge of the base, came running into the room. She brought terrible news from the outside galaxy. Both the Zephyrian Empire and the Krex Dominion had learned about what happened to Alex and Lyra. Spies and informants had carried word of their unusual bond to the highest levels of both governments. Now, massive fleets from both sides were moving toward the Valdris system. Kate explained that the human military had also been contacted. Admiral Grace Morgan was leading a fleet to capture Alex for study and protection. The governments were all afraid of what the bond between Alex and Lyra might mean for the balance of power in the galaxy. Lyra's own mother, Empress Zara of the Zephyrian Empire, had declared her daughter a traitor for working with humans. A huge reward had been placed on both Alex and Lyra's heads. Bounty hunters and military forces from across the galaxy were now hunting for them. Alex stood up and felt Lyra's mind touching his. Together, they realized that their personal bond had become something much bigger. The galaxy's leaders were scared because they understood that if humans and aliens could truly connect like this, it would change everything about how different species related to each other. Luna closed her ancient book and told them they had to leave the base immediately. The enemy fleets would find them soon, and they needed to stay free if they were going to fulfill the prophecy and stop the Void Plague. She said there were others scattered across the galaxy who had been waiting for this moment, rebels and outcasts who would help them. Maya gathered her medical equipment and research data. She said she needed to continue studying the bonding process to understand how it worked and how it could be safely shared with others. Alex and Lyra were not just individuals anymore. They were the beginning of something that could save or destroy the entire galaxy. As they prepared to leave the safety of the rebel base, Alex felt the bond with Lyra growing stronger. He could sense her determination and her fear, but also her hope. She could feel his protective instincts and his growing understanding of what they represented. Commander Kate Sullivan provided them with a fast ship and a crew of trusted rebels. As they lifted off from the hidden base, Alex looked out at the stars and realized their real journey was just beginning. The bond that had started with a simple act of saving a life was now something that threatened the established order of the entire galaxy. In the distance, They could see the lights of approaching enemy fleets, but Alex and Lyra were no longer afraid. Together they were stronger than either could be alone, and they were about to discover just how powerful their connection could become. The ship Starfire flew through space as fast as its engines could push it. Alex Carter stood in the cockpit beside Captain Chloe Rivers, watching enemy ships appear on the scanner screen like angry stars. Behind them, 3 different fleets were chasing them across the Valdris system, and all of them wanted to capture Alex and Princess Lyra. Chloe was a smuggler who had been running illegal cargo between star systems for most of her life. Her ship was old but fast, and she knew hiding, places that military forces had never discovered. Her partner, Beth Knox, worked in the engine room, making sure their ship stayed ahead of the hunters. Both women had joined the growing rebellion because they believed in freedom for all species. In the ship's medical bay, Dr. Maya Rodriguez continued her tests on blood samples from Alex. What she found made her hands shake as she worked. The bonding process was not stopping with just Alex and Lyra. Every time someone came into contact with Alex's changed blood, they began developing connections to nearby aliens. The effect was spreading slowly but surely. Luna Brightleaf sat in the ship's common area, reading from her ancient elvish books and trying to understand what was happening. She had lived for thousands of years, but she had never seen anything like the bond between Alex and Lyra. The prophecies spoke of such a connection, but the reality was more powerful than the old writings had described. Lyra was in her quarters, practicing with her enhanced abilities. The energy patterns she could create now were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Alex could feel her working through their mental connection, and sometimes he could see what she was seeing even when they were in different parts of the ship. Alarms started ringing throughout the Starfire as enemy ships got closer. Chloe called everyone to the bridge and showed them what the scanners were detecting. Admiral Grace Morgan's human fleet was approaching from one direction. Empress Zara's Zephyrian ships were coming from another. The Krex Dominion had sent their fastest warships from a third direction. Beth Knox came up from the engine room with oil on her hands and worry on her face. She told them the ship's engines were running at maximum power, but they could not outrun military warships forever. They needed to find a place to hide soon, or they would be captured. Alex felt something strange happening in his mind. Through his bond with Lyra, he could sense the emotions and thoughts of the enemy ship crews. Most of the soldiers chasing them were just following orders, but some of them were afraid. They had heard stories about the human-alien bond and did not understand what it meant. The first attack came from the Krex ships. Their weapons fired green energy beams that lit up space around the Starfire. Chloe threw the ship into a spinning dive that made everyone hold onto their seats. Beth's engines responded perfectly, pushing them away from the enemy fire. But more ships kept appearing on the scanner. This was not just a chase anymore. It was a hunt, and Alex and Lyra were the prey that every major power in the galaxy wanted to catch. Lyra came to the bridge and stood beside Alex. When she touched his hand, something amazing happened. Their mental connection suddenly expanded, and both of them could see and understand everything happening around their ship. They could predict where the enemy shots would go before the weapons were fired. Working together through their bond, Alex and Lyra began helping Chloe fly the ship in ways that seemed impossible. They could sense danger before the scanners detected it. They knew which direction to turn to avoid enemy fire. The Starfire danced between laser beams and missiles like it was alive. Maya made another shocking discovery while studying her blood samples during the chase. Alex's blood was continuing to change. Each time he and Lyra used their bond, the changes became stronger. Soon, anyone who touched Alex's blood would develop similar connections much faster than before. Luna realized that this was exactly what the ancient prophecies had predicted. The bond between species was designed to spread, creating networks of connected beings who could work together in perfect harmony. But she also knew this was why the galaxy's leaders were so afraid. If the bonding spread too far, it would end the old system where different species fought each other for resources and territory. Connected beings could not hate each other the way disconnected ones could. This threatened the power of every government and military force in the galaxy. The chase continued for hours as the Starfire flew between asteroids and around planets, trying to lose the pursuing fleets. During one particularly close call, Alex and Lyra's bond allowed them to coordinate the ship's defensive systems in ways that amazed even Chloe and her experienced crew. Beth Knox was the first crew member to be affected by Alex's changing blood. During a battle when she was injured, and Alex helped treat her wounds, some of his blood mixed with hers. Within hours, she began to sense the emotions of the alien refugees they had rescued from a damaged transport ship. Two of these refugees were Amberstone and Crystal Vale, warrior women from different alien species who had been fighting each other before the bonding began to affect them. As Beth's new abilities connected her to both aliens, all three women found themselves working together with an efficiency that should have taken years of training to achieve. Maya documented everything that was happening and realized they were witnessing the birth of a new kind of civilization. The old barriers between species were dissolving, replaced by connections that made cooperation natural and conflict difficult. But the enemy fleets were not giving up. Admiral Grace Morgan sent a message to the Starfire demanding that Alex surrender, himself for the good of humanity. She claimed that his blood could be used to create super soldiers, but only if it was studied and controlled by the proper authorities. Empress Zara sent her own message, calling Lyra a traitor to her own species, and demanding that she return to face justice. The Krex Dominion simply attacked without talking, believing that the bonding process was a weapon that could be used against them. Alex and Lyra made a decision together through their mental link. They would not surrender to any of the chasing fleets. Instead, they would find other beings who believed in the future that their bond represented. Luna had told them about hidden colonies and rebel groups scattered across the galaxy. As the Starfire jumped into hyperspace to escape the immediate chase, Alex felt the bond with Lyra growing even stronger. But he also sensed something else, something vast and dark moving in the empty spaces between star systems. Luna's warnings about the Void Plague began to make more sense. The enemy fleets that were chasing them were doing exactly what the Void Plague wanted. By fighting each other and refusing to cooperate, they were feeding the ancient evil that threatened all life in the galaxy. Only the spreading bond between different species could unite them against the real enemy. Maya finished her latest round of tests and brought disturbing news to the others. The bonding process was accelerating. Soon, it would be impossible to control or stop. Within months, the effect would spread to thousands of beings across dozens of worlds. The galaxy would be forced to choose between accepting this new form of consciousness that connected all species or destroying everything to prevent it from spreading. Alex and Lyra realized they were not just running from their enemies anymore. They were racing against time to prove that their bond could save the galaxy before fear and hatred destroyed it completely. In the distance behind them, the three enemy fleets had stopped chasing and were now fighting each other, each trying to claim the right to capture the bonded pair for themselves. 3 months had passed since Alex Carter first gave his blood to save Princess Lyra. What started as one human helping one alien had become something that was changing the entire galaxy. Alex stood on the bridge of the Unity's Dawn, a massive ship that had become the center of the growing bonded community. Captain Rachel Miller commanded this flagship with skill that amazed everyone who served under her. She had been one of the first humans to volunteer for the bonding process after hearing about Alex and Lyra's connection. Now, she could communicate perfectly with alien crew members from dozens of different species. The Unity's Dawn was not alone in space. Around it flew hundreds of other ships carrying bonded crews of humans and aliens who had chosen to join the new community. These ships came from all parts of the galaxy, and their crews had abandoned their old governments to be part of something better. Alex walked through the ship's corridors and marveled at what he saw. Human engineers worked alongside, Zephyrian technicians, sharing knowledge through their mental connections that allowed them to solve problems in minutes instead of months. Krex warriors trained with human marines, teaching each other fighting techniques that no single species could have developed alone. In the medical bay, Dr. Maya Rodriguez led a team of doctors from many different species. Her research into the bonding process had advanced rapidly with help from alien medical knowledge. She had perfected a safe way to share the bonding ability with volunteers, though each new connection made the effect stronger and harder to control. Luna Brightleaf spent most of her time in the ship's library, studying ancient Elvish texts and comparing them to what was happening around them. She had made contact with other elves who lived in hidden places throughout the galaxy. Most of them were afraid of the bonding process, believing it was dangerous and unnatural. Lyra's abilities had grown beyond anything anyone thought possible. She could now create energy fields large enough to protect entire ships from enemy weapons. More importantly, she could help newly bonded individuals learn to use their connections without being overwhelmed by the experience. The bond between Alex and Lyra had become the foundation for a network that now included thousands of beings. Through their connection, information and emotions could flow between different ships and colonies instantly. It was like the entire bonded community shared one vast mind, but this growth had not gone unnoticed by the galaxy's major powers. Admiral Grace Morgan now commanded a combined human-Zephyrian Krex fleet that had been created specifically to destroy the bonded communities. The old enemies had finally found something they all feared more than each other. Even Luna's Elvish homeland, the mystical realm of Ether Moor, had declared the bonding process a threat to the natural order. Ancient Elvish leaders who had lived for millions of years believed that different species should remain separate and distinct. They saw the bonding as contamination that would destroy the diversity of life in the galaxy. Alex and Lyra received reports from their network that made them realize how serious the situation had become. Bonded communities on dozens of worlds were being attacked by military forces. Many innocent beings who had simply chosen to join the new way of life were being killed or captured for study. Commander Kate Sullivan arrived on the Unity's dawn with news that changed everything. She brought information about massive military buildups at a place called the Nexus Point, where space itself was thin and reality worked differently. All the major powers were gathering their fleets there for a final battle to destroy the bonded communities. But Kate also brought something else: refugees from the fighting, including bonded individuals who had escaped from captured colonies. Among them was a former Krex warrior queen named Nyx, who had been transformed by the bonding process from a violent conqueror into a peaceful leader. Dr. Maya Rodriguez examined these refugees and made a disturbing discovery. Many of them reported sensing something vast and dark moving in the empty spaces between star systems. Through their enhanced connections, they could perceive things that unbonded beings could not detect. Luna gathered everyone in the ship's main meeting room and shared what she had learned from her ancient texts. The Void Plague was not just a destroyer of civilizations. It was a living entity that existed partially outside normal space and time. It fed on conflict and separation between different species, growing stronger whenever beings chose to fight instead of cooperate. The massive military forces gathering at the Nexus Point were doing exactly what the Void Plague wanted. By uniting against the bonded communities, they were creating the kind of fear and hatred that the ancient evil needed to fully enter their dimension. Alex felt something through his connection with Lyra that made his blood run cold. The Void Plague was already beginning to emerge at the Nexus Point, drawn by the enormous concentration of hostile military forces. If the fleets fought each other and the bonded communities there, it would give the Void Plague enough energy to begin, consuming entire star systems. Maya's research team worked frantically to understand how the bonding process could be used as a weapon against the Void Plague. They discovered that the ancient evil could not understand or feed on true unity between species. When beings were completely connected through the bond, they became invisible to the Void Plague's hunger. But there was a problem. The bonding process took time to work properly, and they did not have enough time to connect all the military forces that were gathering for battle. The fleet commanders were too afraid and angry to listen to reason about joining the bonded communities. Lyra proposed a desperate plan through her connection with Alex. If they could somehow extend their bond to cover the entire battle zone at once, they might be able to force the opposing fleets to understand what they were really fighting. But such an effort would require a massive sacrifice from someone with the medical knowledge to amplify the bonding effect. Dr. Maya Rodriguez volunteered to make that sacrifice. She had been studying her own blood samples and knew that her long exposure to the bonding process had changed her in ways that could be used to help others. If she could release her enhanced blood into the battle zone's atmosphere, it would spread the bonding effect to thousands of beings at once. The plan was dangerous and might not work, but it was their only chance to prevent the Void Plague from destroying everything. Alex and Lyra used their growing network to send messages to bonded communities across the galaxy, asking them to gather at the nexus point for the final confrontation. Captain Rachel Miller prepared the Unity's Dawn and its fleet for the most important battle in galactic history. They would not be fighting to destroy their enemies, but to save them from an ancient evil that threatened all life. The bonded crews worked together with perfect coordination, their connections allowing them to operate their ships like extensions of their own bodies. As they approached the nexus point, Alex could sense the Void Plague's presence growing stronger. Through the network of bonded minds, thousands of beings shared his fear and determination. They all understood that this battle would decide whether the galaxy would be consumed by an ancient evil or transformed into something better than it had ever been before. Luna stood beside Alex and Lyra on the bridge, her ancient eyes filled with hope for the first time in millions of years. She told them that the elvish prophecies had always said this moment would come, when the choice between unity and destruction would be made by beings brave enough to sacrifice everything for the future of all life. The Unity's Dawn and its fleet emerged from hyperspace at the nexus point to find the largest concentration of military forces the galaxy had ever seen, all preparing to destroy each other while an ancient evil waited in the darkness between dimensions to feed on their hatred. The space around the nexus point filled with more warships than Alex Carter had ever seen in one place. Thousands of vessels from the human fleet, the Zephyrian Empire, and the Krex Dominion formed battle lines that stretched across multiple star systems. At the center of this massive gathering, the Unity's Dawn and its bonded fleet looked small and outnumbered. Admiral Grace Morgan commanded the human forces from her flagship, the Endeavor. She sent a final message to Alex, demanding his surrender, claiming that his capture would prevent a war that would kill billions. Empress Zara led the Zephyrian fleet personally, her royal ship gleaming with the light of 1,000 energy weapons aimed at her own daughter. The Krex Dominion had brought their most powerful war machines, massive ships that could destroy planets. Their commander, General Vex, believed that the bonding process was a disease that had to be burned out of the galaxy before it spread further. But Alex could sense something that the unbonded fleet commanders could not detect. Through his connection with Princess Lyra and the network of thousands of bonded minds, he felt the presence of the Void Plague growing stronger in the empty spaces around the nexus point. The ancient evil was feeding on the fear and hatred that filled the gathered fleets. Luna Brightleaf stood on the bridge of the Unity's Dawn, her elvish senses detecting distortions in reality itself. She told Alex and Lyra that the Void Plague was preparing to fully enter their dimension. The massive concentration of hostile forces was exactly what it needed to break through the barriers that had kept it contained for millions of years. Dr. Maya Rodriguez made final preparations for her desperate plan. She had modified her own blood with compounds that would spread the bonding effect rapidly through space. If she could release it into the battle zone, it might force the opposing fleets to understand what they were really fighting against. The bow. First shots were fired by the Krek's fleet, their green energy beams lighting up space as they targeted the Unity's dawn. Captain Rachel Miller responded by ordering her bonded crew to defensive positions. Through their mental connections, every person on every bonded ship moved with perfect coordination. Alex and Lyra stood together on the bridge, their bond allowing them to coordinate the entire bonded fleet as if it were a single organism. When enemy missiles approached, they could sense their paths and direct defensive fire with incredible accuracy. When enemy ships tried to surround them, they could predict the movements and respond instantly. But the unbonded fleets were too large and too powerful. Even with their enhanced abilities, the bonded ships could not win a conventional battle against such overwhelming numbers. Worse, Alex could feel the void plague growing stronger with every shot fired in anger. Dark tendrils began to appear in space around the battle zone, visible only to those with bonded senses. The void plague was starting to emerge from the spaces between dimensions, drawn by the conflict like a predator sensing blood in the water. Maya made her choice. She entered an escape pod that had been modified to spread her enhanced blood through the battle zone. As she launched toward the center of the fighting fleets, she sent a final message to Alex and Lyra through the bonded network. She told them that her sacrifice would only work if they could help the newly bonded beings understand their connections before fear overwhelmed them. The pod exploded in the center of the battle zone, releasing Maya's enhanced blood in a cloud that spread through space faster than light. Every unbonded human and alien in the area was instantly exposed to the bonding effect at its most powerful level. Admiral Grace Morgan was on the bridge of her flagship when the bonding hit her. Suddenly, she could feel the emotions and thoughts of every Zephyrian and Krek's warrior in the fleet. The hatred and fear she had carried for alien species dissolved as she experienced their hopes and dreams directly. Empress Zara felt her daughter's mind touching hers for the first time since childhood. Through Lyra's memories, she saw the truth about the void plague and understood that her fear of the bonding process had been exactly what the ancient evil wanted. General Vex of the Krek's Dominion experienced human emotions for the first time in his life. The rage that had driven his people for generations seemed small and pointless compared to the vast love and compassion he suddenly felt from the bonded humans around him. Across all the fleets, thousands of beings who had been ready to kill each. Other moments before found themselves connected in ways they had never imagined possible. The weapons fire stopped as ship crews struggled to understand what was happening to them. But the void plague did not stop. Sensing that its food source of hatred and conflict was disappearing, it emerged fully from the spaces between dimensions. Dark tentacles larger than starships reached into normal space, beginning to drain energy from the nearest vessels. Alex and Lyra felt the network of bonded minds expand to include the entire battle zone. Through hundreds of thousands of connected beings, they could perceive the true nature of the void plague. It was not just a destroyer, but a living entity that existed by consuming the separation between different forms of life. Luna called out to all the newly bonded beings through the network, sharing her ancient knowledge of how to fight the void plague. The only way to defeat it was to achieve perfect unity between all species present, dissolving the barriers between individual consciousness that the ancient evil needed to survive. Admiral Grace Morgan was the first to understand. She ordered her human fleet to work with the Zephyrian and Krek's forces, using their new mental connections to coordinate their efforts. Instead of fighting each other, they turned their weapons toward the dark tentacles that were reaching for their ships. But conventional weapons had no effect on the void plague. Energy beams and missiles passed through it without causing damage. The ancient evil continued to grow stronger, feeding on the fear and confusion of the newly bonded beings who did not yet understand their connections. Alex and Lyra made a decision that surprised everyone in the network. Instead of trying to destroy the void plague, they opened their minds completely to every bonded being in the battle zone. Their personal connection became the foundation for a single shared consciousness that included hundreds of thousands of different individuals. For the first time in galactic history, humans, Zephyrians, Kreks, elves, and dozens of other species shared a single unified awareness. Through this connection, they could see the void plague clearly and understand that it was not evil in the way they had thought. It was simply hungry, and it had been feeding on separation and conflict for so long that it had forgotten how to exist any other way. Instead of attacking the void plague, the unified consciousness offered it something it had never experienced before: true unity and connection. The ancient entity, faced with a form of existence it could not understand or consume, began to change. The dark tentacles that had been reaching for the ship started to glow with the same light that marked the bonded beings. The void plague, instead of destroying the unified consciousness, was being transformed by it. Luna wept tears of joy as she realized what was happening. The ancient prophecies had not spoken of destroying the void plague, but of healing it. The entity that had consumed civilizations for millions of years was remembering what it had been before hunger and isolation had driven it mad. The transformation spread outward from the nexus point, carried by the network of bonded minds to every corner of the galaxy. On countless worlds, beings who had been enemies for generations found themselves connected in ways that made war impossible. The old barriers between species dissolved as understanding and empathy replaced fear and hatred. Admiral Grace Morgan, Empress Zara, and General Vex found themselves working together to establish new forms of government based on cooperation instead of conquest. The bonded communities that had been hunted and persecuted became the foundation for a new galactic civilization. Years passed, and Alex Carter stood on the observation deck of New Harmony Station, watching children play in the gardens below. Human, Zephyrian, Kreks, and Elvish youngsters played together without any awareness of the old hatreds that had once divided their species. They were the first generation to grow up fully bonded, and they represented the future of the galaxy. Princess Lyra, now Queen of the United Worlds, worked beside him to establish peaceful contact with other galaxies. Their bond had grown to encompass millions of beings, creating a network of consciousness that spanned star systems. Dr. Maya Rodriguez was remembered as the hero who had made the final transformation possible. Her sacrifice had not only spread the bonding process, but had shown that true unity required individuals willing to give everything for the greater good. Luna Brightleaf had returned to Ethermoor, where she helped other elves understand that the bonding process was not contamination, but evolution. The ancient elvish knowledge combined with human adaptability and alien wisdom to solve challenges that no single species could have handled alone. The void plague still existed, but it was no longer a threat. Transformed by its contact with unified consciousness, it had become a force for connection instead of separation. It helped newly discovered species join the galactic community, ensuring that isolation and conflict would never again threaten the peace that had been so hard won. Alex watched the sunset through the